Today is all about learning how to do curves. What you're going to need is a small rotary cutter. I like to use this one, anything smaller than a 45 millimeter, to be able to get around your lines. You're also going to need pins. Some people can do this without pins. I can't, and it's great to learn how to do it with pins first. Then you're also going to want a template. A plate is perfectly round, so it's a great template to use. And you're going to need some freezer paper that you can buy from the grocery store. Also, for the Drunkards Path, you are going to want a template. This is one that my mom had made. It's not accurate, but it's just a great way to show what a Drunkards Path template looks like. To start, we are going to learn about a Drunkard's Path. This is a Drunkard's Path, which is a really fun block to learn how to make. It has this beautiful curve that you can then use to make all sorts of different patterns. I've done a lemon quilt. My mom has done a flower quilt. If you go on Pinterest, there is just a plethora of inspiration to use for Drunkard's Paths. The fun thing about Drunkard's Paths is that it's a curve, but also if you look on the back for your 1/4 inch seam, it's not clipped, so you don't have to worry about adding extra clips. For this, we highly recommend buying a store-bought template. It will just make your life 1,000 times easier. So what you're gonna do is you cut out from your template and you have your background piece, and then you have your piece that fits in to your background piece. And if you look closely, when they're butt up together, your inner piece sticks out, and that's just because of your seam allowance. The way to stitch a curve is you have to stitch this way and wrapping around. So it makes curves a little bit more difficult, but once you get the hang of it, it's really not bad. So how you start first is we're going to try to find our middles for each piece. So you'll just go ahead, fold it in half, and kind of finger press the middle for both of your pieces. Then what you're going to do is pretty side to pretty side, you're going to line up your middles and you're going to stick a pin in it. I like to stick my pin about 1/4 inch down, just so it's kind of, on your seam line from where you would stitch. It doesn't have to be perfect, by the way. Then the next thing you do is you pin your ends together. And again, I'm doing about 1/4 inch down, about where I would have my stitching line. For some people, this is enough pinning and you can just get going. For others, add more pins. And honestly, it doesn't matter whether you add 3 or 16, do whatever makes you feel comfortable and whatever is going to work best. I'm going to go ahead and add a pin in between these. And it gets a little finicky, but you just have to make sure everything lines up flat. So if that means curving it yourself before you pin, go ahead and do that. To begin sewing your curve, you're going to first want to move your needle over 1 notch to the right. This will create a scant 1/4 inch, which just means it's going to be a little less than a 1/4 inch, which helps a lot when you're doing curves. So first, take out your pins because you do not want to sew a pin. And then when you begin sewing, make sure you put your needle down into the fabric. This way it holds your place while you're going, because sewing curves is a slow process. It's not fast, it's slow. So take your time. Make sure that you're not stretching your fabric and your edges are lined up, and slowly go. Sometimes I find that it's helpful to pull out the bottom fabric a little bit and have my hand underneath that to help guide. Once you have it all finished, you're going to go ahead and iron. I like to iron going into the curve This just helps things lie really flat. So just do a little light pressing on the back and then flip it over. Do some pressing on the front and then voila, there is your curve. And here are your Drunkard Path blocks. What we recommend is making your block bigger than what you need so that you can trim it down later. This just makes sure that if you mess up your curves ever so slightly, that your final product will come out perfect. Next, we'll learn how to make your own curve. So first you're gonna need some freezer paper. This you can buy in the grocery store. And the great thing about a freezer paper is it's shiny on one side and then it's not on the other. So the shiny side actually can adhere to your fabric when you iron it off, and it peels off. It's great. It's really fun to work with. To begin, you're going to want to put your shiny side facing down because you're going to draw on the opposite side. This is the size of the block that I want. And what you're going to need is a template. So a plate works perfectly. It is a perfect curve. And it's what I have on hand. I want my curve to be, I think, about 4 inches up from the bottom. So I'm going to just mark rough estimate about 4 inches. And then I'm going to place my plate on and kind of guesstimate, make sure it kind of lines up wherever I want, and then draw my curve. Next, we're going to need to mark the center with 2 little lines, and then one on either side of the center, kind of halfway in between the edge and your center line. Then you can go ahead and cut. As you can see here, I just cut along the curved line that I made. Once you have that cut out, then you're gonna pick your fabrics. So I want this bottom part to be this golden fabric, and I want the top part to be this blue fabric. And now to the ironing board. What you're gonna do next is you're going to iron your freezer paper shiny side down onto the back side of your fabric. And you're gonna wanna make sure that you leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance along your curve that you're going to be sewing. And we recommend using starch for this. I didn't have any starch on hand for this demo, but in the future I would definitely recommend using starch for doing any kind of curve. You also want to make sure that your iron is not on steam because the steam will warp your paper. And look at that, it sticks like glue, but it's not glue, it comes off perfectly. Next, you're going to go ahead and do that to your other piece. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to extend our notch lines. I'm just using a pencil, but if a pencil freaks you out, you could always use a friction pen. You're then going to grab your smallest ruler. This is mine. Ain't it cute? And you're going to mark your 1/4 inch seam allowance. My pencil's a little chunky, so it's not working very well, but what you would end up doing is you would just end up going all the way around marking your line. But I'm gonna live life on the edge and just go ahead and instead of marking out, use my rotary cutter. If you're gonna be risky, be careful though. Do the same thing to your next piece. Now that our pieces are all cut out and marked, we can take the paper right off. You're ready to pin just like you did with the Drunkard's Path. This time, you're going to line up your notches, starting with the middle notch and then going on to your next notches. But when you get to pinning for the very edge of your piece, make sure you move your fabric from a pin that you've already placed by a notch over to the edge. Now you're going to stitch exactly like how we did with the Drunkard's Path. So move your needle over, 1 click to the right, pull out your pins, and just start stitching away. And my mother will kill me for telling you this, but this curve is not perfect. It is one that you have made. So sometimes you have to stretch the fabric just a hair to get everything to fit perfectly. Here is my piece. It's a little wonky, but that's because it hasn't been ironed yet. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to iron into my curve and make sure that my iron is on hot and steamy now that there's no paper to warp. Look at how much better that already looks. And what I'm going to end up doing is trimming my edges so that everything is square and perfect. And there you have it. Can't wait to see your guys' curves.